I have made some pretty dramatic changes in my life. And every time I did, it felt really hard at the time. And I look back and I'm so grateful I had the strength to make those choices.
Hello and welcome to Holistic Circle Podcast, Spiritual Conversation. My name is Philipp Kobald. We are reaching out to people who are passionate about spreading light, love, and joy. And I'm happy to have here with me today, Chris Wasko. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Philip. How are you?
Great. I hope I got it right.
You did. And I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I usually ask where people from. Where are you from?
Right now, I reside in Southern California.
Oh, but you're fine. Everything is okay where you are?
For now, we were in a little bit of a red zone earlier this week, but so far okay. But yeah, it's been an interesting time for sure.
Yeah, I had actually three calls with people from LA, and I was always like, "Are you sure you have time to make the call?" Yeah, and
Yeah, no, LA has gotten hit very hard. It's very sad.
all right, yeah, no, it's I don't have words for it, and so I hope everything will be right. Okay, so I've all our viewers' thoughts go out to you, I'm sure.
Thank you.
All right, well, we'll try to start the podcast usually by giving our I'm starting to talk like a king, my guest.
I like that
No,
though.
the opportunity to quick introduce themselves, just people a little bit understand what you do, so we can get the ball rolling to get a little background. It's okay.
Okay, yeah. Well, as you said, my name is Chris Wasko. I am a spiritual counselor, an energy healer, and a psychic medium. I came into my gifts rather late in life as my background is in business, and my awakening came in a way that truly stunned me more than anyone as I embarked on my healing journey. I opened up to spirit when really I was only just trying to heal my nervous system from the trauma of my upbringing. And as I continued to heal, I opened up more and more. And now I do this work to help others not only heal their nervous system, but to heal their energy body from the trauma that resides within.
Right. I know you have this very specific take that you see the connection between trauma and spiritual development. I think that's something that you see very specific. That
Yeah.
you see that there is a blockage or there's something if it's not in alignment or if one develops, the other one develops as well. So I think this is a very little bit unique take. I haven't heard in that way. So maybe you can a little bit talk about how you see that connection between trauma and spirituality and how one helps the other or
Well,
blocks the other.
yeah, I mean, I could only speak from my experience and those of my clients. So if people have other experiences, I never try to correct anyone's personal truth. So I at least want to say that. But for me, I noticed that as I was healing, it was just opening me more and more. And as I was working with clients, the same thing was happening. They would start telling me how they were having dreams and they would start seeing things, or they were becoming more in touch with their intuition. They trusted themselves more. And as I continued in this work, with I was recognizing is the more aligned someone's energy body became, the more in tune they were. So whatever their internal gifts are, that tuning is what was allowing them to become more connected to themselves and more so their intuition.
Right. This is a hot subject, and you always say tuning. You specifically talk about body tuning, or you talk about also alignment with outside energies. How you define the word tuning?
Well, I think it's even interesting I say that because I wasn't even thinking of it that way. But if you think of it, our bodies resonate with music, right? Our organs resonate with individual notes. So when it is fine tuned, when we look at our bodies as an instrument or as a multitude of instruments, we recognize that when we fine tune these elements of us, we become more in alignment. And on the contrary, if you are out of tune and you are disconnected from your body, from your energy body, that is, many things become out of tune. You start to see things happen, in your health. And how things can manifest in your body. So I've noticed just how interesting it is. The more someone works on themselves, works on their healing, and that's going to look different for each person because we're all different as human beings. But the more they do that internal work, the more they will become more aligned and more connected to themselves. And again, just that tuning process is going to look different for each person that chooses to do so.
Right. I mean, half the whole spiritual world is all about tuning. So there we
Exactly.
go.
Tuning
And
in.
either, or right, if it's some people going over chakras to have their certain vibrations, energies, colors, or crystals, or if they're chanting, singing, or if there's so many tuning techniques, it's like endless, basically. But I think what you said, what some ancient Peru people would like to hear, to see the body as an instrument. I think you have a lot of ancient cultures who very much would like the concept, and most likely they, you know, that there is some traditional Asian healing. They can give you chants just as a recipe. As we take some tablets, like a box of tablets, they would write you a chant, and they would just keep singing it, and they expect you to get healed by this little song that you sing. And also in traditional medieval Catholic
Yeah.
European world, there are also certain prayers that are clearly connected to certain organs, like Maria, Ave Maria, for example, would be connected to the heart. And
Yeah.
interesting enough, there's a lot of A vocals inside, which of course would resonate to the Sanskrit chants that are healing the heart. So it's bloody interesting. So tuning is the thing. So there we go.
I think so, at least in my experience. I feel that when one really embodies that, they're becoming more connected to themselves and they understand themselves and they understand their energy. And it really is life changing. You see things differently, you act differently, you feel differently. It's just a amazing process of connection.
Right. The reason why I made my little speech, because these days is a hot topic about working people online or working people live. Are you working with your clients in your studio, in your hands-on, or you mainly work online with your clients?
I do both, but most of my clients are online.
And how you see the difference when you effectiveness, or what is your take on the hot subject of the hour, working remotes and working live?
Well, I believe energy can be read anywhere. I don't notice a difference if someone is online versus somebody is in my office. I think a lot of times people prefer the in person because they feel more the resonating. However, I always like to give people active practices too. So while I may do an energy reading session with somebody, I don't just do a session and then say, "Thanks for coming. It's nice to see you," and that's it. I like to give active practices to the individual that will help them. Some might call it homework, where they now get to use techniques on their own and keep
Will you give
working
us
toward
some
it.
examples?
Like, one
What
example, I love EFT, emotional freedom technique, also known as tapping. I think that's a wonderful one to work with your energy. So, I will, if I feel for one that that client is going to respond well to it, then that's something I will find that will connect to them. So, I'll either make a EFT video for them or I will find one that I feel connects to their energy and I will send that to them and say how many times I think they should do this before shifting to maybe something different because I believe that when we do these practices over time is when we notice these shifts. When people do it for say like a day, 2 days, a week, they may see a little bit, but you really need to do it over time to see it strongly not only resonate, but shift the energy because that's what we're working toward. You can have the energy shift in a matter of a day. People often will refer to this when looking at an aura. When you take a picture of somebody and it shows their aura, an aura can change moment to moment based on your mood, your feelings, your energy. The same with you working with your energy. So, the more you put these things into practice, the more likely you're going to see a shift. Whereas if you do it for a little bit of time and then you stop, whatever was starting to shift will likely go back because your body is so comfortable with where it once was. No matter what that is, that's your baseline. That's your level, right? So if your baseline is immersed in trauma, that's what your body is going to understand as safe. So the subconscious mind becomes attached to that and will seek that out. This is why people will often notice patterns of relationships that they may not love, but they notice I keep finding the same person and this is a toxic relationship. Well, there's something in the energy there that your body is recognizing as comfortable. So, in order to shift that, you need to teach the energy body that things are different and you have to do that at a gradual pace. So EFT is one of those things that helps because it's working with the meridians as you are tapping each of these points in your body. You're not only speaking the words, because speaking is good, much like affirmations and good, you're teaching your body in that way. But the tapping points is actually reaching the meridians so that you're changing things on a cellular level.
Right. Yeah, coming back to tuning the instrument of the human
Yeah,
body.
exactly.
That's a nice one. Uh, This is a great one, and a good thing I've heard today. Good. Right. So now, so basically, you already started the next question, which then comes to trauma. So that would be then the next logical step. When we see the good way, the tuned instrument, the developed instrument, and you talked about the processes, that how you have to be persistent, and nothing comes overnight, and all of it. This is great. But we have to look a bit at trauma. Yes, we all understand feeling the trauma. I think that's now becoming common, that people constantly feed the trauma and enjoy in a weird way. I'm such an old guy that I remember when people used to smoke, right? Cigarettes in the old days. And those packages had those crazy warnings, right?
Yeah.
As like you're suicidal and all of this, the old days. And I remember always so strong when you they confront the smoker and say, well, listen, you're still smoking. Look at this package. And like, look at now, I'm going to kill myself.
Hmm.
It was such an odd thing to say in a way. It was a, and I always think about that scene, a person saying that to me when I think about trauma, how people know it's bad for them, but they still can't stop doing it. What is your take on that?
Of pretty much like 0 to 7, a child, their main job is to survive. So they're going to adapt to their environment. So, whatever that environment is, that is going to be the style they adapt to. So, in my case, for example, I had an extremely volatile father, and I had to adapt to his volatility in order to be safe. Is he going to hit me? Is he going to flip out? Is he going to scream at me? So my nervous system became trained in fight or flight. And it also had elements of having fawning as well, like, how can I please him? How can I please my mother so she won't tell on me because she would often weaponize my father? "Oh, wait till your father gets home." There was a lot of that, and I, "No, no, no, please, please, please." So that's fawning. So again, these are adaptation styles because a child doesn't know to tell their parent like, "No, that's not right." That comes later, but not in those early formative years. So when we adapt to this, that's all we know. That's what we understand because our nervous system becomes hardwired to live in such a situation and be in such an environment. So that's why when we get older, we often will find relationships that mirror that because that is what our nervous system recognizes as normal. And I didn't know for an extremely long time that I was in a traumatic environment because it's all I knew. It was scary and it was terrifying, but I didn't recognize it as trauma. I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought I needed to fix things in myself in order to please them. And that's how we're trained. And that's how the nervous system, the subconscious mind all becomes hardwired to these elements. And it is not until we start to realize, okay, this isn't right, things can be different and we start making some changes accordingly. And that's going to look different for every single person. And not everyone has the same upbringing. You could have an upbringing that is in no way volatile, it could be incredibly distant. And your nervous system is going to then adjust to that. So we're all, again, adapting to the environment we were raised in. And whatever that looks like is what it looks like for that person. And we now grow into society accordingly, and then we start to recognize, are these patterns healthy or not? Because really, the way that we start to see it is when we look at the patterns.
A a stupid question comes to mind. I'm so sorry. I have to ask it. Did you ever come across a person who had like a perfect childhood?
Me? No, I have not. I think though, because of my childhood, I tend to receive a lot of clients that have been through a lot of trauma because, energy attracts energy that is
Because
similar.
there's one little funny story. A friend of mine now is going into therapy with her. She's going to therapy with her mother. And you know what's the complaint? So the trauma that got inflicted to her is that this mother is horribly nice, horribly caring, and just a wonderful person. And that's why she's now into therapy and blames everything on the mother because she was just so great.
Oh, that's an interesting one. That's one I'd love to climb into. 'Cause there's always something, right?
It's
There's an element of, it's always a matter of looking at the mirror, right? So what are you seeing in your mother that you don't like about yourself? What are you seeing in your mother that you do like about yourself? So when you're able to look at things in these ways and, but in a way that's neutral, that's the most difficult part because we're often so emotional about the things that have happened to us, especially with the people we know and love and have been in an environment with for so long. It is very hard to be emotionally neutral. So that's a challenge for most of us, right? But when you really can look at the mirror and then look at everybody else in your life as a mirror, what has that taught you? And how do you want to move forward with that? Because if you like it, you're going to kind of stay with it. And if you don't, you're going to want to make changes. And how do you do that and figure that
did,
out?
did you had did you have chance to talk about this with your parents? Did you have moments to, as part of your own therapy, to a little bit confront and bring this on a table and discussion at some point, or Thanksgiving usually comes to mind?
Anytime I tried, it was not good growing up. I remember one time I was probably in my early 20s, and I told my dad I was scared of him. I I forgot actually even what I was wanting to talk to him about, but I started to broach the subject, and he's like, "Just say it." I was like, I'm struggling to because I'm scared of you, and I'm scared of how you're gonna react." And he mocked me. He made fun of me for being scared. And so that obviously hurt, but I was used to being hurt. I mean, the worst things that have ever been said to me in my entire life have been said to me by my own parents. So the world doesn't really scare me. They did though. The world did scare me though because if that was my home life, it was scary to think what was outside. The home is where we're supposed to feel safe and protected. And so I was an incredibly shy child and was very scared of adults, especially not knowing that it related to the volatile behavior that I was raised in. So,
I have another one for you.
God,
Another a friend of mine, female again, she is now in complete hate and complaint to her family because she got so protected. It was so warm and loving that she thinks this kind of cozy, wonderful environment of laughing and joy and hugging and cuddling did not prepare her for the roughness of life. And she blames her insuccess in business because of her childhood, early childhood was so warm and loving that she's not tough enough for the real world.
that's an interesting one. I actually I like that
So I took that.
perspective though, if you think about that, I'm on the flip side of that, right? I was real prepared for the world because the world was much less scary than the environment I was raised in. So I did very well when, I worked in business and I was very successful and I have no problem speaking. I have no problem being in an environment where with new people. Even if I don't like it, I could still handle it, right? So I can absolutely credit my upbringing for this. It made me stronger. Would I have loved, though, to just have more peace and to feel loved in life? 100%. So I think, just when we look at it on a soul level, we are all going to have challenges. It's just going to look different for each of us. I think it's very important we don't compare because oftentimes we can either disregard our own experiences or disregard other people's experiences, thinking one has it better or worse than another. And I don't feel that's fair to anybody, especially one trying to heal. But really, ultimately, Earth is a school. We are all here to learn. So we all signed up for something. Whether it's going to look easy or not is just that's perspective and that's subjective. So it's really just a matter of ourselves as individuals and our experiences. So when we can look at it from that learning perspective, I feel we make our lives a lot easier and we stop blaming people and playing victim.
Uh, just to add life observation from a harsh, hard environment. So you understand the need of the work and to open to love and all of those kind and warm things. Yes, it's a heavy process. It's a crazy process, but the other way around is nearly impossible, right? Coming from absolute love and tenderness and toughen up is an interesting one. It's actually, I think the path is longer in a way because it's odd. But let's come to the moment because another thing with trauma, there are moments of awakening or moments of understanding or moments to see clarity where you basically you've been walking all the way this way and then you start to turn around and now you walk the other direction. You try to catch up, you try to heal, you try to so these are this awakening moments and they're always very telling or interesting. I guess, with trauma. And speaking, like sitting with your father and then speaking out loud what troubles you clearly is one of these moments where you definitely stood up because it's huge, most probably huge to
Yeah.
say this out loud. And so tell a bit of from the experience with your clients and from your own these moments of awakening, because most of us always imagine that you must hit a roadblock or you must, you must hit a wall to then turn direction. But sometimes it comes very slow and sometimes it comes very silent. So maybe you can say a couple of things about how to, for the listeners on this podcast, how to see these patterns in themselves and listen more attentively, maybe to their signs that they have.
Well, I think you said it best is we often receive signs and we often will have this inner feeling that something needs to change. So recognizing the patterns is a big thing. We all have patterns in life. It's just part of being human. And the patterns that make us uncomfortable, I feel is our soul striving for change. Like, make a different choice because, we have free will. So it all is going to come down to our choices and how we choose to go about. So in my situation, my choice to no longer speak to my parents ultimately was this catalyst in my life changing. So I made this choice because the volatility of my childhood was now starting to reach my children as and also my husband. So it was really becoming a threat. And I said, "No, I'm not doing
Wow.
this anymore." And I said enough. And of course, many horrible things were said to and about me and probably still are. And really, the first thing I needed to do was just heal myself. I was terrified because really was scared of what they might do to me. How will they try and hurt me? Because again, that's how my nervous system was trained. And so the first thing I did was I just went to therapy. I really need to unpack narcissistic abuse and what that looked like in my life and how to heal from it. And I was just taking those little steps. So again, over time, though, when I look at this in hindsight, there were so many opportunities I had where I probably should have cut them off. And I kept forgiving them and I kept allowing these patterns to continue. And I mean, my dad went as far as hitting one of my children, and I still forgave him and tried to have a relationship with them. And then he threatened to hit my husband, and that was I'm just not doing this anymore. Like, this is not happening. And but of course, in hindsight, I regret not cutting him off after he hit my children or even before that, right? Like, there's these things that I've had to process and try not to beat myself up over and forgive myself and just have forgiveness for the process of my own soul lessons and what I've encountered. But just, to answer more of your question, I just feel that when we make these major decisions and they usually go against a lot of our feelings, it's just we're listening to some deep inner feeling that's been tugging for a long time. And then when we finally do that, our life can really change in a very dramatic way But in the beginning, it feels horrible and scary, and because it's unknown. Change is unknown, right? And that's why change is often so scary to people, and for me, it was about safety, like, I don't know what could be worse than this, so I'm just gonna cut this off and see what else will happen, but it changed my life. Not only am I better, I'm better on so many levels. I mean, I healed my nervous system. I don't have that fight or flight jump out and trigger like it used to. I I'm a better mother, I'm a better wife, I'm a better friend. I just feel like there's so many things that I added to my life just by making this choice to heal and to heal this generational line, because when you make a point to be a cycle breaker, you are pushing that forward and you are pushing that backwards as well. And I think when people make these choices for themselves is when these little awakenings start to happen. Some people have very dramatic awakenings. I feel in my experience, because trauma is always in layers, the awakenings tend to happen in layers, because as you're healing, and that's a journey and a process, there's these little elements of awakening that happen along the way. And you're kind of in this evolutionary process.
Right. I just would like to add that it's unfortunately very common for narcissists to let it out on the grandchildren, because once you have those new children in the house, everyone pays attention to them. They are all of a sudden most naturally the center of attention. Well, they're cute, they need a lot of help, there's always a fuzzing about them, and narcissists go crazy literally, that everybody know wants to make a hot milky, and is it sleeping, is it doing well, is it eating well, and all of this is what they actually would like to hear about themselves.
Yeah.
And everybody just
Very good
fusses
point.
around them. It's funny, sad how often this actually leads to an escalation.
Yes,
Very
I
sad.
I agree, it's incredibly sad, and fortunately for me, I've been able to come to a place where I don't hold any anger toward my parents, because I've really been able to look at them as wounded children. They didn't start life this way. Something made them this way, and I've been able to see and recognize the patterns and see how they've shifted forward, and I've chosen not to continue the pattern because I had it too. I didn't know it at the time, but I absolutely had the narcissistic tendencies, because when you are raised in a narcissistic household, you are going to come out with some tendencies. It's usually referred to as fleas. You don't necessarily become a narcissist, it's a spectrum. So you will fall somewhere on that line. And oftentimes it's a controlling element. You are trying to control an environment because you were raised in an environment where you had no control. So you strive for it, so that's why they tend to become very abusive and controlling parents.
Right. It's you took my next question away, but this is good because it came naturally, so to say. But because I always like to ask at this point what the concept of forgiveness means to you. It's the usual, but you quite also answered it. You came quite far in that concept. And it's so interesting because it's such a old concept, and a lot of younger people have such a complication with the concept of forgiveness, right? It's not popular at the time. And because everything is labeled, as you said, you know that your father's a narcissist and this, and everything has a label. And then when you confront forgiveness, and me being an old guy, I somehow come to understand if you really want to progress in your healing, there have to be an element of forgiveness, which is not the same as, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So maybe you speak a younger person to the world, make a point for that inner forgiveness, or is a crucial element of healing. Maybe find better words than me.
Well, I love that you bring this up because I agree with you. Forgiveness is so often confused as essentially saying what was done to you is okay. And that's not it. What was done is not okay. And especially things that are necessary, quote unquote, unforgivable. It is not forgiving the things that were done in that sense, right? It's for putting forgiveness energy out is Like that saying, when we hold on to a grudge, it's like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. So you're only
That's my
hurting
point.
yourself when you're holding on to that grudge, when you are holding on to that anger.
Um,
It is only hurting you. It is not hurting that other person. And when we get to that place of forgiveness, it's about that inner space, that heart space of knowing I am deserving of so much better. I love myself and I deserve all the wonderful things life has to offer. And when I push forgiveness into other people's direction, I feel a very good way to do this is to elevate it to the soul level. So I really like to look at it like I recognize the divinity within you and I forgive you. Because sometimes it's very difficult to look at the human, even from a distance, and say, I forgive you, because you're really remembering the hurt. But when we really can connect to our own divinity, because we're all divine beings and we all love each other on that level, and we are here to learn these lessons, but we're releasing so much when we are able to push that forgiveness. And this does not go to say you are not going to have some human elements and someone triggers you and says something awful and you're just like, this person is the same. But you'll probably notice you're different. You're not behaving the same way. You are now not having the same responses you would have. And that represents your own healing. So people that are meant to change likely will, but that's their choice. We can never change others, we can only change ourselves, but if we really wanna make a change within, I don't ever believe in forcing forgiveness because when we force forgiveness, we could just hurt ourselves as
yes,
much as holding on to a grudge. But when you're able to work
yes.
through the process, it's recognizing forgiveness is a process and take those steps. But you have to love yourself first and you have to forgive yourself first because so many of us beat ourselves up. How could I have let that happen? How could I have allowed this to, you know, occur, right? And that's an important part of forgiveness, beating yourself up, that you don't deserve that, but a lot of us do it, and myself included.
You said it so much better than I ever could. But I agree with everything that you have said. And the poison part is my favorite part of it, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah,
And I sometimes understand once you come to that moment that you can forgive, that more or less marks the end of the therapy, or that marks the end of a certain process, or this is like the turning end point when you can forgiveness is more or less finding a space for it in your heart,
yeah.
whatever it is. I mean, so I'm so happy that you said it in such a clever way, because it's very important that especially the younger generation was very much self-focused, and it's great that they work on themselves, and I love it. And it's great that they look at themselves so much more proud, and they try to discover all of the things that have been going wrong in their childhood and this and that and workplace related things and so on. And everybody's very hovering over them. And are you good? Are you good? It's almost like there's some angel flying over them and all day long. Are you good? Are you good? Are you feel good here? You feel welcome here? And it's an alien concept for an old guy like me, but I think it's a great, once you understand you're not alone on the planet. And that's for me is a key problem right now that I see. I like that people watch themselves. I like that they take care of themselves and they value themselves. But hey, what's with your next door neighbor and what's with your friends and so on? And there is a disconnect in my observation. They would never admit it because they think they're very ecological and they think they're very modern and very progressive and they like LGBT and this and that. And they're so great people. But clearly observed, there's a lot of narcissism going on actually. So that's now I'll bring it to a much broader level. And let's talk again about narcissism, but this time all around the world.
Yeah, I believe narcissism is certainly foundational in our society, and I think it could easily be debated that we all have elements of narcissism within us, right? And if we wanna dive into that in a spiritual manner, it's really where the ego comes in, right? How strong is your ego? How much is your ego stepping forward, right? So really, when you look at narcissism as a spectrum and you see where you fall into that, and it's how is it leading you? Is it leading you? Is it taken over elements because it can make us look at ourselves in a way of in a duality sense. Like, are you, things that you do well versus things you don't do well. And, I don't know if that really can help us so much, but I do believe in the aspect of being self reflective. But it's interesting too, because I notice this a lot on social media. You know, a lot of people will like to dismiss posts about narcissism and narcissistic abuse by basically saying, well, everybody is narcissistic. We all have elements of narcissism. And while I believe that's true, when you don't understand the levels of abuse that someone can encounter because of narcissism and then you're dismissing it, that's really just being incredibly judgmental and naive about a subject. So I don't feel it's a term you can just blanket. And I think it is always very specific to an individual. Yes, you're going to see it more in certain arenas, like politics is often one that we talk about that narcissism is very prevalent in, right?
Idea what you're talking about. I cannot imagine. Possibly can I imagine what you could be mean?
There you go. There's certain times that you're gonna wanna see some narcissism, like, in the medical field. If I'm gonna have surgery, I want that surgeon to be so incredibly sure of themselves, and if they are narcissistic and don't have a bedside manner, but they're excellent at their job, fantastic, I salute them, So I feel like there's elements we can celebrate it, but when it goes to that level of abuse because there is a disconnect in somebody's energy when the narcissism takes over. That is ultimately what is going on a deeper level. There's a disconnect in their energy, there's a disconnect in their nervous system. This is, not only just spiritual, but scientifically proven in this aspect now.
I think so too. But with a conversation I tried now a couple of times and I always get blocked off. Uh, but I'll give it one more go and maybe one day I get through it. I mean, I have another 100 recordings to do this year, so you'll manage at some point. Because if I look narcissism and how to cultivate it, to harbor it, I see there's a huge business model out there. Uh, Having a more and more narcissistic society and feeding the dragon with all kind of things, right? Giving them stuff mainly to buy or to cultivate or to self-improve, self-help, self-cure. All of these things is just basically a society trying to figure out if we progress narcissism, we're going to make money out of it. So I'm always keen to find a therapist who works with narcissists or who works with patients, with trauma patients, and then steps back from the praxis and looks at a little bit the whole society and tells us a couple of words how you think one should discover these elements and how one should self-heal or society should heal in terms of society trauma, society narcissism. If you have some things to say, I would really appreciate it a lot.
Well, I feel that if society is meant to heal, it's going to come down to the individuals because many elements of energy are contagious, right? So when one chooses to heal, it often inspires others to heal, and we spread that out. So as each person chooses to do that, because we're working with free will, so everyone has got to choose to do that. Has to choose to stand up, has to choose to be this element of a leader, right? Because our society is trained to follow, right? It's why we have government. It's why we're structured in the way we do. This is not to get political and to go into the good and bad aspects of it, but we have a society designed to follow. So more of us are choosing to not necessarily be so obedient in the following. This doesn't mean that we're going out and we're breaking laws and whatnot. It's more of connecting to that inner aspect of what feels right to you as the individual. And as long as you're not hurting other people, great. And you connect to that and you stick with that. And I believe that more and more people are doing that, especially in the awakened community. It is part of why we're awakening because we have connected to ourselves. And when we connect to ourselves, we are starting to bind as a consciousness and creating that stronger consciousness. And I believe that is going to continue to grow. I also believe it's part of why we're seeing so much volatility in the world because in order for things to change, other things have to fail.
And so I'm with you. I can see the same because now I'm talking every day from people all over the world. And it's very clear to me that there is a spiritual awakening. because I think a lot of people are just not happy anymore with just buying stuff and just feeding constantly the endless circle of uselessness and just feeding themselves. And I guess we all gonna have basically a reaction in some way or the other, like your father or others. Once toys been taken away, in this case, in his case, the attention, he starts beating because he is lost. And once the attention is gone, so I'm in a way hopeful for the society. In the other way, I'm quite also scared because if you take the toys away from the narcissist, it usually don't end up so well in the first role. So, well, we can only speculate and we can only hope for a good outcome. Now, let me last big change, if it's okay for you. We have a couple more minutes because I know that background is in
Course.
business. So let's make a very rough cut and leave this and look a bit because I'm always interested and I'm talking over and over with therapists, people like you, and some of them have a business background. Let's really change the tune. And people are watching right now who are maybe sick and tired with their job or unhappy. You know what I'm getting at? And they want to make change. Maybe they don't
Yeah.
want to become a therapist or yoga teacher or they want to do things like that. But they're scared and they're unsecure, unsure. They don't know. It's a scary thing. So maybe you can say a couple of, as a business background person, give us numbers, give us analytics, give us hope, give us encouragement, whatever comes to your mind that you would like to people watching say, I want to be her. What would you tell them?
Well, I believe when it comes to people that want to break away from what they're doing, whatever that is, there's something in them calling them, right? But our practical and thinking mind often gets in the way. And we'll tell ourselves why it cannot happen. We talk ourselves out of it, but that inner yearning is still there. So it is really a process of faith over fear. And that's why they call it a leap of faith, because you are literally leaping out and you have no idea what's going to happen. But if you can have the faith and literally can say those things, like, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I believe in myself and I believe it's going to be great. And this is all not to say it's going to be easy. I have made some pretty dramatic changes in my life. And every time I did, it felt really hard at the time. And I look back and I'm so grateful I had the strength to make those choices at the time because it at the time it felt like my life could have fallen apart, that I could have lost so much. But again, that's the practical mind, that's the thinking mind. So when you try to talk yourself out of something, you're going to be right. That's like how affirmations work, right? You tell yourself you can't do something, you're right. You tell yourself you can do something, you're right, within reason, of course, but it's really you have to convince yourself first. You can't have the world convince you, so if you're reaching out to other people, "Should I do this? Should I do that?" You're actually giving your power away. You have to go within, "I'm gonna do this," and you just decide, right? I have actually a really good example. The college I ended up going to, I chose pretty early I wanted to go to it. And when my dad asked me where
Greatly.
I wanted to go to school and I told him where, he told me I was too stupid to get into that school. My experience in this was my dad telling me I was too stupid to go to the school I wanted to go to. So I looked right at him and I said, "Watch me." And it was like something came over me, like I blinders came on and all I saw was this goal. And the way I got into this school was actually a little bit unconventional, but I got in and the admissions office called me to tell me I got in. I didn't get a letter like everyone else did. So it was a pretty incredible experience because that phone call happened when my dad was home, and he very rarely was home at this time. And he was the one to pick up the phone, and he told me who was on the phone. And I stood there and I heard, with my dad watching, that I was accepted. So again, don't let someone tell you what you can and cannot do, even yourself. You have to make that decision and then just you keep that focus and you have that faith in yourself and life kind of happens. It's pretty amazing.
Uh, is the most beautiful possible ending a podcast can have.
Thank
Uh,
you.
double winning, winning and winning over mean bad. I mean, how much more winning
It,
can you do?
it was one of the most incredible things ever. I still light up when I think of that, especially the fact that he told me I was too stupid. and that I didn't even take it in. I just looked and I said, "Watch me." Like, that was my answer. I'm even still baffled.
Right.
I was 18
Yes.
years old.
Yeah.
It's a kid.
Well, that's what it is. This stupid saying, what doesn't break you makes you harder, right?
It's it
And
it
but
does.
it's not a good recommendation for parents to hit their kid as hard as you can and tell them all horrible things in the hope that they get stronger. But it is what it is. That in this kind of high pressure environment, some break and end up with drugs and God knows what, and some end up looking like you. Yeah, but it's one in a million, one in a million. And therefore, we definitely want to protect our kids from that kind of environment. I'm with
Absolutely.
you 100%. Thank you so much for coming here today and and dealing with my crazy questions.
I thank you. No, they're great questions. This was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so. And sorry, I usually in the end. Oh, whoa, whoa, we must have another 2 minutes. I let people a little bit quick tell what they're working or how they can be consulting. I mean, links and information, everything will be down there. But then the last question usually is you which kind of services you offer, or just a self promotion minute if you
Okay.
want.
Yeah, no, I appreciate Thank you. The best way to find me is my website, which is my name, chriswasko.com. And my most popular service is energy healing. And I do probably, I would say 90% of the work I do is that. So I love to connect. And if anyone just wants to shoot me an email and say hi, I get those too. And I'm always happy to respond and connect with people all over the world, which has been wonderful. It's why I love doing podcasts. So thank you very much for having me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon. Ciao.